It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Onyx News. I'm your host, Margie K, and this evening we're going to get right to it because we have a very special guest, my friend Rey Hernandez. Rey is a Ph.D. candidate at the University of California at Berkeley. He's retired counsel for the U.S. Department of the Treasury, president and chief counsel for the Consiouness and Contact Research Institute, known as CCRI. He's also the co-founder of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation and author or co-author of 9 academic books on the relationship between consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence via the contact modalities, with many other PhD academics and medical doctors. Welcome to the program, Rey.
Thank you, Margie. Thank you for that kind invitation.
Well, it's so good to see you again and have you back on the show, because I know since the last time I had you on, you have been very, very busy, doing a lot. And golly, we're just going to have to get right into it. But I think for some of my listeners who don't know your history, could you give us a brief description of what got you interested in the subject of UFOs, paranormal, consciousness, and contact?
Well, I was basically slapped in the face into this new reality. I had been, previous to my work as an IRS tax attorney, I dealt with estate taxes. I was a professor for many years. And then back in 2012, my wife and I had an experience with an energy being in our living room that made my wife disappear. Our dog, who was totally paralyzed, we were going to be euthanizing her later that afternoon, put them both into another reality, put me to sleep. And when I woke up an hour later, my dog was completely healed from a total paralysis and was running around the entire living room. And my wife had an hour of missing time. And that's how it started. And after that was just nonstop paranormal experiences.
That would be enough to wake anybody up and make them realize that there is a lot more going on in the world than, is immediately recognizable in our 3D world. So your world changed to ultra dimensions in a split second, basically. So
yes, that's what it was.
Tell us about your relationship with Dr. Edgar Mitchell.
Well, I guess a good way to start it is that as part of these paranormal related experiences that I began to have after that initial experience in my living room, I began to have a series of orchestrated events, and there were numerous of them, usually 3 days in a row. That's how these experiences would engage themselves. Back in May of 2013, I was driving my car going to work at 8:30 in the morning, and I was literally taken outside of space and time into another multidimensional reality. And there I was shown what my work is now, which is the relationship between consciousness and the paranormal contact modalities. I was shown that all of the paranormal, which I call the contact modalities, they're all interrelated. They should not be viewed as separate and distinct phenomena. And I was shown how it works. I was shown what is consciousness, which is the whole structure of the mind of God. And that the mind, humans are actually going through different layers, different dimensional planes via diverse experiences. And non-human intelligence can come down to us from other multidimensional realities. And so I was literally given a blueprint of how our greater reality works, together with the death process and the near-death experience process, out-of-body experiences, astral travel experiences, which are very different from out-of-body experiences. And then when I was brought back to the car, no time and space had elapsed, because I was still listening to this interview of this man that was doing a documentary on his liposuction. He was doing art fat from it. And then when I got home, I got an email from Mary Rodwell, who, as you know, is one of the world's major researchers on UFO Contact Experiencers. Mm-hmm. And she had been working for more than 3,500 individuals that have had UFO-related contact experiences. So her email went like this. It says, "Dear Ray, I'm sorry that I'm responding to an email that you had sent me 6 months ago, but it just popped up on my computer today, the day of that astral travel experience." And then we spoke to like 1:30 in the morning, my time. And then I told her, look, I got to go to work tomorrow. So we agreed to set up a time to talk again the following day. But at 9:30 in the morning, I got a phone call. "Hello, is this Rey Hernandez?" I said, "Yes." "Who is this?" "Dr. Rudy Shields." I said, "Who?" Well, Dr. Rudy Shields became one of the co-founders, together with the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell and Mary Rodwell, of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. And Rudy was an emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University. He used to work very closely with the late Dr. John Mack. And so I told him, he asked me what happened to me, because Mary told him about my experiences, and my experiences included physics downloads and consciousness types of downloads about the nature of our reality. And that's what Rudy was interested in, and Edgar. So he heard me and said, "Ray, what you got was Dr. Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness." And then he says, "I'm going to talk to Edgar after we hang up and encourage him to work with you," because I was given a clear mission. And the mission, in the summarized format, was you need to inform humanity of the relationship between us, the spirit world, and consciousness. And I could talk about that later on, but we'll be here all night. But then he gave me Edgar's telephone number. I called him up, and Edgar invited me to his home. So that was, I appeared at his home within 48 hours of that initial out-of-travel, astral travel experience. Mm-hmm. And so at Edgar's home, I was there like 6 hours, and eventually was at Edgar's home more than 20 different times. I was in the hospital 2 days before he died. And so we became very close friends, and he became my mentor. And so at Edgar's home was when the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation was organized within 48 hours of that astral travel experience.
Well, and there are no coincidences, as you well know, only synchronicities.
Yeah.
It seems like when the student is ready, a mentor appears, or a new ability appears, as I can attest to, because every year around my birthday, I get a new skill. And I wonder if in any of your studies, if you're finding that to be true with anyone that has that you've interviewed or studied.
Well, I've learned that, first of all, I call them orchestrated events, series of orchestrated events, because synchronicity is just too soft of a term. These are orchestrated by the mind of God. And what I've learned is that the major contact experiencers, individuals like yourself, their lives have been that, a series of orchestrated events to guide them on their path towards obtaining, deeper understanding of our nature, of our reality. And but in terms of specifically the birthday question, I've never heard of that. But I have heard is that increasingly over the years, they get increased, usually psychic abilities. Everyone gets in the beginning precognitive type of experiences. That's like the norm, okay? But then you begin to have more stronger precognitive abilities, like you're visually seeing things that are going to occur, or you have telepathic downloads, which is very, very common. Like that's happened to me, since my experiences, like, don't go out that door, don't go out that door, or like, go out the door, go out the door. And then if you don't do it, if you're hesitant, they'll yell at you, and so these are all very, as you know, Margie, you've heard this a million times. These are all very common types of experiences that major experiencers go through. And what it is, from my understanding now, is that we're dealing with what I call the mind of God, which is this higher consciousness, which is working with each of us at an individuated level. I call what people refer to as soul or a spirit, I call it my individuated unit of consciousness. And that's a term that was borrowed by Tom Campbell, the noted OBE and NDE, OBE and astral travel experiencer from Robert Monroe. He actually was Robert Monroe's, I would say, mentor in many ways. And is just a brilliant man who I consider the world's major astral travel experiencer. And so he refers to who we are is as individuated units of consciousness, that we're eternal spiritual beings.
I'm interested in space-time. And in fact, I just had something happen to me yesterday where I was taken out of time twice while driving. And I saw a woman come out of a door, turn the corner of her house, and she was carrying a red bag. And then as I passed the house, she came out of the door again. So this is 2 seconds later with the same bag in the same manner. And I looked where I first had seen her turn the corner of the house, and there was nobody there. So that happened. And then a few minutes later, I drove by Captain D's on Nolan Road here in Independence, and it was boarded up. All the signs were taken down, and it was old and dilapidated looking. And then, so I drove by that. I went to another place. And then when I pulled out of the other place, Captain D's was back to normal. Everything was as it was. So we're talking about, time anomalies, things like that. How do you think that there's a manipulation of space-time involved with the contact modalities?
Oh, 110%. That's the number one commonality of all of the common contact modalities.
Interesting.
The number one common modality among all of them. Because, let's take a look at it, Margie, right? With a near-death experience, is there a manipulation of space-time? Obviously, because your individuated unit of consciousness, your soul, is being brought to another multidimensional reality. Okay? With an out-of-body experience or an astral travel experience, is there a manipulation of space-time? Obviously, because your soul, your spirit, your individuated unit of consciousness is being brought to other multidimensional realities. Okay? And then with the UFO contact phenomenon, okay, we were able to establish without a shadow of a doubt that the UFO contact phenomenon involves a manipulation of space-time. For example, 50% of these individuals were brought to another multidimensional reality. So these are the 4,350 people that took our surveys who answered that, yes, I saw a UFO, and that, yes, I've had some type of contact with a non-human intelligence. Okay? Out-of-body experiences. 80% of these people were having out-of-body experiences. As you know, it's an extremely common phenomenon for UFO contact experiencers. And they don't have to be major experiences. It could be someone that's just seen one or two UFOs, okay? Not people like yourself and I that have had many UFO sightings. And in my case, very up close, these huge objects right on top of me. And so with remote viewing, okay? You've done it before, okay? You've taught classes on it. Your mind goes out of your body into another dimensional reality, and you're seeing things, okay? You're visually seeing it with
exactly.
your mind, okay? That's a manipulation of space-time, because you're physically in your home, for example, okay? But yet your mind is some other location. So seeing a ghost or a ghost or spirit is seeing someone that's already dead, okay? They should not be in your living room looking at you, okay? But yet how many people do, how many people have seen Aunt Matilda a week after she gets buried, Is Aunt Matilda real or not real? Is she physical or not physical? Well, the answer is both, And so that involves the manipulation of space-time. Hallucinogenic journeys, okay? You take, DMT or magic mushrooms or something like that. I've tried it once and I had Jesus Christ right in front of me in a lotus position, helping me to heal my friend who's next to me. And I became a shaman, okay? From the Andes, okay? So that was a total manipulation of space-time because I knew I was that shaman. And I hear him breathing on top of this guy. So it's all of these experiences. That's the number one commonality, a manipulation of space-time.
And there are, to me, it seems like there's an increase in people willing to come forward to discuss events like this. And just under the paranormal umbrella with everything, ghosts, time travel, UFOs, ETs standing in front of you, all of that has to be related. And it seems like they're more willing to talk about it. But do you think that these experiences are actually increasing in number? Do you think we've been stepped up in vibration and more people are having experiences?
I don't think they've increased the number. I think it is that people are now opened up because everywhere there's a YouTube, show on Netflix and all these programs on TV, on the web as well. They're all over the place. So before, you and I are old enough to know that at one time the web never existed. Okay, and so where do we get our information? Via books? Okay, but now it's readily accessible everywhere. And let me tell you a little side story, Margie. I wrote my book, The Mind of God. It's titled The Mind of God, a spiritual virtual reality model of consciousness and the contact modalities. So I wrote that as a prelude to my 6-volume A Greater Reality book series. Okay. And the way I start off our book was to show, first of all, that the time is ripe for all of these things that to come out at pretty much the same exact time, which is in the early 1970s. For example, Robert Monroe book Higher Journeys about out of body and astral travel experiences was in the early 70s. It was 1972. Raymond Moody's book on near-death experiences, Life After Life, was 1975. I argue that the UFO concept began to circle all around the world once Star Trek got syndicated. Okay, because people have been talking about UFOs since the Roswell crash. Okay, but that was just a tiny group of people. But Raymond Moody's book sold millions of copies, translated to almost every language known to mankind. Okay, when in 1975, Higher Journeys, Robert Monroe's books, translated to numerous languages, again in the early 1970s. When did remote viewing really take off? The early 1970s at the Stanford Research Institute. Okay, and so the exceptions were, for example, ghosts and spirits. That's been talked about since the dawn of mankind. So I argue that almost all of the contact modalities developed within 5 years of each other. Okay, now is that a coincidence? No, this is an orchestrated event. Why? Because humanity has reached a crisis point of self-destruction, of self-annihilation. So what these experiences are is awakening up. As you know, a lot of these, I would argue all of these contact modalities experiences are to waken us up to understand that we are eternal spiritual beings and that our planet, we have to protect this planet. We just can't destroy it. And so what these experiences are doing is to telling us that, look, you have the possibility of destroying your human species via nuclear weapons, via ecological self-destruction. People don't realize in 100 years, most of the major coastal cities are going to be underwater. We're talking billions and billions of people. And what are going to be the repercussions via nuclear war, nuclear disaster? Because let's say, for example, Bangladesh has almost 2 billion people. What happens is half of Bangladesh, which is located at sea level, goes to Pakistan or to India. Both of them have nuclear weapons. They're not going to want, 500 million people invading their land. They're going to nuke them and bomb them. Okay, given the nature of who we are as so-called civilized societies. So if you take that all over the world, you're going to be having major economic and political upheaval. And so we're at the cusp of self-annihilation. And these are wake-up calls that, look, you need to be working cooperatively. You have to be more kind, more caring to each other. You have to become more loving, just like NDE experiencers. Once you have an NDE, a very large percentage of these people were told, you need to go back. No, I don't want to go back to this hellhole. No, I want to stay up there. No, you need to go back. And when you go back, remember, it's not important how much money you have. It's not important what religion you are. It's not important how famous you are. What is important is that you need to learn how to love. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's the universal message that from the NDE phenomenon. But yet we're the total opposite of that. We're destroyers. We're killers.
Well, yeah, some of humanity, too much of humanity is in this warlike mode, level of consciousness since the beginning of time. They think that is the only way. They've got to protect themselves. They've got to conquer places. They have to have all the land and all the resources for themselves. The concept is slowly going away, but not fast enough.
No, not fast enough. So really what we have here, Margie, is a race to see whether we can destroy ourselves or we can change as a human species. And I argue that it's not a coincidence why all the paranormal became apparent to the world at pretty much the same time. So that's not a coincidence. As you know, there's no such thing as coincidences. They're a series of orchestrated events, just like your life, just like my life.
I like your terminology there. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and take our break. We're going to take a short 3-minute break, and we'll be back right after this.
The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1-ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1-ounce and half-ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com. How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Margie Kay. This is Unex News, and I just want to mention a conference coming up in late June in Alton, Illinois. It's the Haunted America Conference. It is the oldest haunted and ghost conference in the United States. It started in the early 90s. So this is a really great conference. We will be there. So if you go, do please look us up and check out our booth. We'll be glad to see you. We're speaking with Rey Hernandez this evening. Rey, I could talk to you for 10 hours straight, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. Let's talk a little bit about, I want to find out your thoughts on the theory that UFOs and UFO-related beings are holographic projections.
Oh, yes, 100% correct. First of all, I'm not the only one that's come up with that hypothesis. This was initially proposed by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the last year of his life. And then Dr. Jacques Vallée also made that proposal in several of his books. He said, could these be holographic projections that we're actually seeing? And so based upon the last experience that you mentioned of that woman with the red purse, okay, is that woman with the red purse, was she real or not real? Was she physical or not physical? Well, the proper response is both, okay? Now, was that woman with the red purse, real? Yes, it appeared real to you the very first time. But then the second time you passed by there, the house was not there. And then that woman reappeared to you later on. And so that begins to flush into your mind, was this experience a valid physical experience? Now, as you know, and all your audience members know, we get ingrained at an early age with the five senses. So we only believe in our physical reality, that is the only real reality. But then once you've had these paranormal type of experiences, you realize that our reality is not just the perceived physical reality via the five senses, that it's much more complicated than that, okay? Now, let me tell you an experience that would provide a foundation for that theory that what we're seeing are holographic projections. And this was the next major experience I had after that energy being in our living room healed our dog, okay? And that was over the next 3 or 4 months, my wife had been calling down UFOs, and these huge objects would appear to her. She had spent an entire month in Mexico, and that's what she was doing. That was witnessed by her relatives. And so when she came back, I found out that she was calling down UFOs. So I said, what the hell? Let me give it a try. I never called down a UFO in my life. And then within 15 minutes of me attempting to call down a UFO, this huge object appeared right on top of me. And it was maybe 6 city blocks in length. It was about 100 meters tall. So it was a huge object, but it wasn't physical. It was comprised of hundreds of oblong streaks of light. And it had one circle of these oblong streaks of light in the front, another huge circle of these oblong streaks of light in the back, and in the middle was like the body of it, okay? And inside was all this white plasma swirling around, but you could see the swirls that went back, 6 blocks, super fast and returned back. And so then my friends who I've been waiting for to give me their parking tickets, his parking tickets, the male's parking tickets, they show up, but they show up husband and wife. And then they immediately run to where my daughter and I were, and they said, Ray, what the hell is that? I said, you know damn well what it is. And they said, no, it can't be. So then for the next 2 minutes, they began to try to explain it away. So after 2 minutes, their explanations just became more sillier, you know, circus lights in the middle of freaking Miami, you know? And so after 2 minutes, I started laughing. And then with my mind, I communicated to the intelligence behind what we were saying. And can I cuss here on the show?
Oh, yeah, with limits.
I can.
Yeah. You just can't say certain words about medical treatments. So.
Okay. Anyway, what I communicated to this intelligence was, you better come up with some better bullshit than this, because my friends don't believe you. That's what it was. Instantaneously, after I said that, what we were watching totally disappeared. And now a new object replaced it. And what we saw was much, much more lower to the ground. The first one was very low to the ground. The palm trees blocked these concentric oblong streaks of light, you know, that's how close it was to my next door neighbor's house. Now, what we saw was now 50 very large orbs, the size of a Volkswagen car, right low to the ground, and all of them were blinking on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. And they would take turns, one at a time, blowing up real big, and then getting back down. And then another one would blow up and get back down. So all the other ones were on and off, on and off. Now, this occurred instantaneously after I communicated with this intelligence and said, you better come up with some bullshit than this, better bullshit than this, because my friends don't believe you. So that's when I realized, not at that same instant, but later on after the event, and I was digesting it, I said, oh my God, what I was watching was not physical, was perceived to be very physical, but it wasn't, because a totally different object totally replaced it. Okay. So what this was a projection. Okay. And then later on, after I met Edgar Mitchell, he had a theory that our reality is a holographic projection of our reality. And it's his theory of the holographic theory of consciousness, of how it works. It's very, very complicated. I'm not going to attempt to describe it to your listeners, but if they really are seriously interested in it, you can go to the CCRI website, which is agreaterreality.com, agreaterreality.com. And we have articles from volumes 1 and volume 2 in there. And one of the articles is Dr. Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness. So it's a little bit dense, a little bit difficult, but try to read it, and it'll give you a basic understanding of the holographic nature of our reality. So to answer your question, yes, 110%. And that has been confirmed. Let me give you another question, another example to confirm what I just stated. I'm sure you know Dr. Joseph Burks.
I know the name.
Okay, Dr. Joseph. Okay, you know the name. Dr. Joseph Burks is a retired medical doctor. He's been doing CE5 since the early 1990s. And as a matter of fact, Preston Dennett went out with him when Preston was a young man. And that's how Preston saw them. And the majority of his UFOs was with Joseph Burks. Okay. And Joseph now lives in upstate Northern California. And so he told me that during this time period, he was traveling on a 6-lane highway, and parallel to him, very, very low to the ground, was a World War I wooden airplane, painted in fire engine red, and had like a yellow lightning bolt on the back of it. Instead of the 3 wings that these planes had, you know, these old World War I planes, it had 1 wing, but it was teeny, it was tiny. And then he looked, it didn't have a pilot. Okay. And so he said, first of all, with these little tiny wings, it was going like less than 60 miles an hour. And it was almost like a helicopter, you know, very, very slow, paralleling him, okay? And he says, this thing cannot fly. Physically, it's impossible to fly. And then he saw it didn't have a pilot. So he concluded later on that this was a holographic projection, okay? And so one time we were comparing notes of each other. And so he viewed our reality as being both virtual and spiritual. I said, holy cow, Joe, I'm writing a book just with that title, the holographic nature as a spiritual and virtual reality model of our reality. So then I talked about my first UFO that I ever called down, of what I just told you, the story. I related to him. Then he related the story of that wooden airplane painted fire engine red with no pilot. And so he had reached the same conclusion, that these are holographic projections. So throughout many of the stories that I have used in my book, A Greater Reality, volumes 3, 4, and 5, and you wrote an article for volume 3, your own personal experiences. So a lot of these major experiencers that I have in my book and have talked about very similar experiences, where they reached the conclusion that these were holographic projections. So it's not just Rey Hernandez, it's Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek and numerous other people that have written about these concepts.
Well, I had an experience that makes me agree with that concept, because several years ago, I did an investigation with a lot of just various paranormal activity, took some pictures of these orbs or balls of light that would come down the hill. And the lady said they were coming, they did it every night. So we go out there at dusk and here they come. And one was fairly close to me. I took some pictures of it, blew it up. And here you see an ET, a little ET inside this orb that's the size of a softball at a console. And so I had seen that, this happened years ago, but then about a year ago, I decided to remote view that to see what the source was, because I knew that there probably wasn't a physical extraterrestrial in a little tiny UFO, although, that it's possible. So I remote viewed it, and here I see a gigantic craft in a big control room, one tall ET watching over everything, obviously a supervisor, and then several, maybe 6 or 8 extraterrestrials. They had no hair. They were tall and thin. They're each sitting at a console, and somehow they were projecting to the Earth. And the message I got was they were observing, basically one word, observing. And that's how they did it. And so that there are other people who've gotten pictures of the same sort of thing, extraterrestrials inside a ball of light. And these balls of light are, they're a controversial topic. It depends on who you talk to, what different people believe. Some believe they're spirits. Some think they're probes from UFOs, and some people think they're swamp gas. So it just depends on who you're talking to. But that, to me, that experience when I remote viewed cemented the idea that they were sending either an astral projection or a hologram.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, that whole topic of orbs is one of the missing pieces for our documentary film. We need a video of orbs. There are literally thousands of pictures that people have taken of orbs, but we want to be able to show, because we have a section of our documentary on the topic of orbs. So if anyone has it, they could send me an email, and the email would be Contact Modalities at gmail.com. Contact Modalities at gmail.com. So if you have an orb video, help me out. Hopefully later on, documentary.
Okay, I'll put the word out, and also I have a couple myself, so I'll send this to you. You're cutting out a little bit, but is that because you're in Colombia, South America? And
Yes,
tell us
yes,
that
it is.
story. How did you get to Colombia? How did that happen?
Well, let me tell you a story about how I met my wife, my current wife, new wife. I had been in Miami to visit my mom. She's now 93 years old. And you probably know that things pop into your mind for a specific reason. I never wore a ring in my life. Okay. I had zero interest in the ring. And all of a sudden in my mind is, I need to get a ring. I need to get a ring. Okay. You know how these things are. And then all of a sudden, I need to get a ring. So I, recently divorced. I don't have tons of money, but it has to be a good quality ring. And so I said, okay, I'm going to get it from a local pawn shop. So I wrote 4 local pawn shops in the area around my mother's house. And so for the first time in my life, I asked something of God. I always speak with God, but I never made a request. Okay. This time I said, look, God, I'm going to go to some pawn shops tomorrow. If you could help me find a good quality gold ring. Okay. And so the next day, 12 hours later, about 12 p.m., I hear my mom screaming, Rey, Rey, Rey. So I thought she had fallen down. So I ran to her, and she's sitting on her bed, and she has a tobacco box where she keeps my grandfather's poetry in. And the box was open. And right on top of the box was this golden ring. And I said, Mom, did you find that inside the box? Yes, right at the very top. I said, my grandfather, I never knew him that he had a ring. He never had a ring. How many times have you opened that box? More than 100 times, because that's where she kept his poetry. Okay. So this is what it's called in the parapsychological field, an apport. Okay. And my best friend, Alberto Fernandez, who I consider the world's major contact experiencer. He's had all of the contact modalities multiplied by 100. He's an unbelievable. He's a retired DEA federal agent. And his wife is a Ph.D. psychiatrist. His daughter's a Ph.D. psychiatrist. And they've had, numerous experiences that they've jointly shared. But Alberto is the star of the show. And he has a whole china cabinet, an entire china cabinet with apports.
Explain what an apport is.
And so I knew what it was.
Yeah.
An apport is a physical object that mysteriously appears in your home or in a local setting, but it's usually in someone's home. And the more common ones are rings or chains with different objects attached to the chain. And but there's many other things that appear. Alberto has had statues appear. Some of them are large statues. One was a huge Chinese sword after a Chinese warlord appeared to him the day before that taught Alberto about his past life. And they captured it in one of those cameras that take the picture instantaneously. What do they call it? A Polaroid, right?
Yeah.
Polaroid camera. So they have Polaroid pictures of that huge sword Alberto was holding. And then the very next day, it disappeared.
Oh, wow.
So they have a whole china cabinet. So I knew what this was. Yeah, you need to, I don't know if he's recently come out public. I encouraged him finally after many years to write a book about his personal experiences. And you'll be blown away by my friend Alberto. Remember, he's a retired DEA federal agent. He had written 2 books about his time in the DEA. And it's better than those narco documentary that you see on Netflix, because this is the real deal, And so
sounds like I need to interview him.
When I got back to Colombia, I had been.
It sounds like I need to interview him on this show. We can do it together if you can
have 2 people at the same time.
Yeah.
Yes, he's unbelievable. And so anyway, I got back to Colombia, and I had been dating for about a year and a half. Lots of females. But then once they heard my accent, it wasn't native I'm fluent in Spanish, but it wasn't a accent of Colombia. Okay, so they knew I wasn't from here. So it's like, Ray, can you loan me $30? Ray, can you loan me $50? And immediately, once I heard that, it was like, I would get rid of them. So I've been dating all these ladies, getting rid of them, because it was just monetary interest in this. And then I talked to God. I said, look, if you can help me with this ring, I have one last favor to ask of you. Help me find a good woman. She doesn't have to be beautiful. Okay. I don't care if she's fat or skinny or tall or short or whatever, black and white or, different colors. Just help me find a good woman that has the same love that I have. Because I don't want to die an old man without a partner. Okay. And so the very next day, I was introduced to my current wife. And I said, okay, the next time, she's a beautiful woman. So I said, the next time she asks me for any money, which she never has, she never asked me for any money. I was going to get rid of her. Okay. Never. And so we've been together for 1.5 years. We've been married now for about 6 months. And again, it was after speaking with God.
Uh-huh.
I call her the 8-port wife.
Whoops. That you cut out a minute. You call her what?
What I've been the 8-port wife.
Ah, yes, the 8-port wife.
I've got my 8-port ring.
Wow.
And the 8-port wife.
I had something like that happen a few years ago. Well, quite a few years ago, I'm not going to say. I was living in an apartment with my 2 daughters. I went to my jewelry box. Now, I had a class ring from high school that I wore all the time. I go to my jewelry box to get it. It is gone, but my cousin's class ring is there in its place with a red stone. My cousin was living in Venezuela at the time. I called her on the phone and she freaked out because back then you didn't call long distance. This is back when you had to pay extra to call long distance. It had to be something really important. I said, where is your class ring? She goes, it's in my jewelry box. I said, you better go look. So she looked in there. She said, it's gone. I said, that's because it's in my jewelry box. She did not believe me. And I said, by the way, is my class ring in your jewelry box? She said, no, there's nothing there. So I gave it to her that Christmas when I saw her for Christmas. She was just stunned. Nobody could figure that out. And my ring has not reappeared. So I would like to have it back, Ray. Maybe you can ask for
this
me.
Is a high school. This is a high school graduation ring from 1962 in Puerto Rico. Okay.
Wow. What is it about high school graduation ring?
And my grandfather's not raised in Cuba. He came to the United States in 1965. And this is from 1962 from Puerto Rico.
So that's somebody else's
it's
ring and you needed it.
But yet my friend Alberto has somebody else's ring. Yeah. Boom. Here it is.
Wow. And then the appearing of the sword and then disappearing again. That's amazing how that happens.
I detail some of that in my latest book about my personal experiences. I rarely spoke about my personal experiences when I was interviewed, over many years, because I didn't want to mix my academic research with my personal experiences. And so I finally said, okay, I need to document what I've been going through. And so I wrote a book titled A Greater Reality, One Man's Journey of Discovery. And that's the same title of our documentary, by the way. A Greater Reality, One Man's Journey of Discovery. And in that book, I speak about not all of them, but a good many of my major paranormal experiences, including the theories that I've come up with from my experiences and my academic research. Like, for example, that we spoke about earlier, the concept of manipulation of spacetime, the concept of holographic projections. Those are just 2 examples. but there are numerous knowledge of mainstream materialist ufology, and so it's the there was maybe almost 400 pages to our book, and the price is at a minimum on Amazon. I think it's $8.50.
Really? Where can people get your book?
Well, all of my books are available on Amazon. Okay. But if you send me an email, I will send you one of my books available for free. So if you want that A Greater Reality book about my personal experiences, just send me an email. And the email contact CACT modalities MODALITIES @gmail.com. So it's contact modalities @gmail.com.
Okay.
Is available for free from our CCRI website, and the CCRI website for free. Yeah. And
okay.
And the website is agreaterreality.com. agreaterreality.com.
Okay. We're showing that now, and we'll spread the word about that. Rey, you're cutting out a little bit on your end, so we'll go ahead and say we'll sign off for this evening. I want to say I appreciate you so much, all your hard work, and not running from the subject like a lot of people do. You dug into it. You wanted answers, and you have just created a wonderful organization. And I just appreciate that. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, Margie. One last thing before we leave. We have a 3-minute documentary trailer. The documentary will be released in this fall, and you can take a peek at it. Okay, it's in our website, agreaterreality.com. Go in there towards the very bottom of the first page. You will see a link towards the trailer. Take a look at it. What we talk about does not exist. Okay, what we're doing is we have over 50 Ph.D. academics and medical doctors, together with over 100 major experiencers of the contact modalities. And we're linking them both together. We're linking the science together with the experiencers. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to establish that, first of all, consciousness is primary, not our physical reality. This is a perceived illusion, okay? That we are eternal spiritual beings, and the NDE phenomenon confirms that beyond the shadow, that all of the paranormal needs to be studied as one integrated phenomenon under consciousness. And we're doing this academically via these medical doctors and these academic researchers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say this, your approach
so please go to the website and check out the documentary.
Okay, will do. We'll spread the word. Thank you so much, Rey, for coming on this evening and getting us updated on what you've got going on right now. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that documentary and reading your book.
Thank you, Margie.
Now your book is available now.
I'll send it both to you.
Okay.
It's available right now at Amazon, and that's just one of 8 books. We also have a book, A Greater Reality, volumes 3 through 5, and each of them are 800 pages. And each of these books contain a chapter written by a major contact experiencer, like we have your article on volume 3, and it's about 35 pages about your particular experiences. Not all of them, but some of your major experiences. And so we've got medical doctors, we've got academic professors, we've got people from all walks of life that have written about their paranormal experiences, but not just one type. These people have had experiences. They've had out-of-body experiences. They've seen Sasquatch. They've seen UFOs, all within their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. It doesn't end with just one thing. It's everything. So
No.
yeah, we just need to
Correct,
get a handle. Just get a handle on it, and you've certainly done that. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Rey, and I will see everybody here again next week.